Hello and welcome to the agenda on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes, and above me we have Phil Morehouse, who is going to be talking to me today. First of all, we might cover a range of topics, but let's talk about the fact that over 1 in 4 Labour MPs voted for an SNP motion for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Yeah, well, so they say. We discussed this the other day. Well, I did on Thursday. It's not quite true. So there were a few amendments. There were two in particular. There was an amendment from the SNP, which claims they just want the killing to stop, but the amendment didn't say that. And then there was an amendment from Labour. Now, what I've done is to break down the action points in these amendments.
Yeah.
So in Labour's amendment, the one that now of these 56, I think it is, Labour MPs who voted for the SNP amendment against the Labour whip, not all of them voted for the Labour amendment. So they're saying that there's something wrong with the Labour amendment, right? So let's go through what the action points were for the Labour amendment. First of all, that Israel and Hamas and all of the parties, but specifically they did say Israel, had to comply with all international humanitarian laws. So did the SNP amendment. So they were both common. The Labour motion called for Israel to protect hospitals. The SNP amendment did not. Labour called for Israel to lift siege conditions, as did the SNP amendment. So that was the same. Labour called to ensure supplies of food, water, electricity, medicines, and fuel into Gaza, as did the SNP amendment. Labour called that Gazan residents would be able to return to their homes. The SNP amendment did not call for that. The Labour amendment called for an end to the expansion of illegal settlements. The SNP amendment did not. It called for settler violence in the West Bank to stop, which the SNP amendment did not. It expressed concern at it, but not that it should stop. Wow. Labour also called for the increase in the length of the humanitarian pauses. Now, the SNP amendment did not, but you could argue, but that's because they're calling for a ceasefire. The Labour amendment also called for a cessation of fighting, which if you don't see that that is the same as a ceasefire, I don't know what's wrong with you. The Labour amendment also called for Hamas to comply with all international humanitarian laws, which the SNP amendment did not, to return all hostages, which it did, and that Israel has the right to protect itself from acts of terrorism, which it did not. So if you look there, the Labour amendment, in terms of action points, in terms of specific actions for specific groups or general groups, the Labour amendment contained everything the SNP amendment called for in terms of action points, and others as well. And yet 56 Labour MPs felt that they couldn't just go, oh, the Labour amendment covers all of these things and more as well. Yeah, we'll just vote for that. That's fine, and abstain from the other one. So they felt they couldn't do that. And the point that you're going to get onto is ultimately what this is. Because the other thing the Labour amendment called for as well, which the SNP amendment did not, it said, you know, when the fighting stopped, we don't just leave it till the next, because all a ceasefire is, right? We know how a ceasefire works. We've seen, anyone who pays attention to geopolitics knows how a ceasefire works. It's a period of calm where one side or the other, or in this case, maybe both, decide to build up their supplies or plans for another attack later on. Because remember, there was a ceasefire in place on the 2nd, the 2nd as well, but the 6th of October, 2023. So there was a ceasefire in place. So we know how a ceasefire ends. It ends with a breach of the ceasefire. So Labour have further called for specific steps needed for a lasting peace, the two-state solution. The SNP amendment didn't call for that.
The words a cessation of hostilities. Is that right?
Cessation of fighting. It specifically says
of fighting,
and it also says an enduring cessation of fighting. Like, just calling for a ceasefire just means that the fighting stops for what? A week, 2 weeks, 2 months, 3 years? What? It doesn't stop. A ceasefire is not an end, a permanent end. There's the Labour motion calls for a cessation of fighting as soon as possible and a credible diplomatic and political process to deliver the lasting peace of a two-state solution. The SNP amendment don't call for that.
Okay, so I mean, we'll discuss the comms in a moment, but like this was clearly to me before it happened, this felt like an SNP trap
Yeah.
to discredit Labour, who obviously are the SNP's now biggest competition up in Scotland.
It's really
That wasn't the case 13 years ago,
yeah,
but it is now.
It's to divide them. Really, they know it. They knew it would divide Labour because Labour, like the SNP, they were immediately on their own website and social media going, "Oh, Labour and the Tories are the same. Basically, they don't like peace." And it's like, but I've tried to Google it. I did see the SNP amendment, and I've already made notes on it. But just for this, I tried to find it. I can't now find it. It will be somewhere. If I spend hours looking for it, I'll find it. But it's a wonder to me that I cannot Google the SNP Gaza amendment and easily, maybe someone in the chat can find it. I can find lots of news reports on it. I can find what the SNP are saying about it. I can't find their amendment. I can't actually find the text of it anymore. I'd made notes, so I sort of know what's in it.
Yeah.
But I didn't, unfortunately, copy down the link. I did copy down the link to the Labour amendment and the Zara Sultana amendment, which is very similar to the SNP amendment. But I can't find the SNP one, which means they didn't really care about the amendment. They just cared that it would divide Labour.
Which it did. I mean,
it
1 in
did,
4
yes.
MPs voting for it.
And
I
10
think,
and counting front benchers having to resign for it, yes.
Yeah. I think this shows poor comms for Labour. If they can't explain to 56 of their own MPs why there's a difference between the enduring cessation of fighting and a ceasefire, how the hell do they think they're going to be able to explain that to the rest of us?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not
politics wonks.
Yeah, it's not necessarily proof that they couldn't explain it to their MPs. Their MPs may understand it perfectly well, which is why, if you look at their sort of letters of resignation, it's not like, say, it's not like Suella Braverman's letter of, well, it wasn't even resignation, but you know what I mean. It wasn't like that where she's
you
saying,
can't sack me, I resign.
Yeah, it's
after the fact.
You know, I mean, I haven't read all the resignation letters. I've read Jess Phillips' resignation letter. I've read Imran Hussain, who was the first one to quit, and a couple of others. And they're going out of their way to show support for Keir Starmer in all of the respects.
I noticed that, yeah.
So it's not a rebellion in the normal sense of.
It's not a rebellion against Keir Starmer.
Not against the leadership or
the party.
It's this specific position.
From what you understand, do you think this is done in the case of, say, Jess Phillips, because she's worried about how it comes across to the constituents? Again, is this a comms problem?
I think that's possibly true. And if it is true, it's again a nonsense. Because again, I think I may have discussed it on Thursday, but I'll go through it now. We can put some links in for the people watching this later. So there was some polling done this week, specifically of Muslim voters, voting intention. And this was carried out between the 27th of October and the 3rd of November. So it's before this week's amendments. But it is not, I mean, if you think about it, it took place at a time, because Labour's position is evolving, not because they're realizing they got certain positions wrong, but because the situation is evolving. So what happened is on October the 7th, there was a very, very brutal attack on civilians in Israel, right? Now, at that particular point, Israel, of course, had the right to defend itself, which does, within international law, specifically allow it to go to the place where its hostages are being held, Gaza, and to carry out military operations. It doesn't allow them to target civilians. And it also doesn't allow them to say, oh, there's Hamas in that building. Yeah, but there's civilians. Oh, yeah, but that's because they're using a human shield. Yeah, that's how human shields work. That's why human shields are themselves a war crime.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean to say you get to target them. I mean, I've talked to veterans of, like British veterans of Afghanistan, who say there were times when they had a Taliban target that they couldn't take out because there were civilians there. They're just not allowed. Right? It's against the law, international law. So you don't get to use that as an excuse. You don't get to use it as an excuse.
Well, also,
we need to bomb this place.
Also, to be fair, I find it very telling that there wasn't instant footage and photographs of the Hamas supposed base in the hospital in Gaza City.
Oh, I mean, that was an absolute nonsense. So if we're going to go a little tangent there. Well, the thing is, do you even believe that? I'm a physicist, right? It's like, for me, it's weird.
Wasn't it in an MRI room?
Yeah. So So one of two things has happened. Either that MRI room has not been used for a long time, because you can't just switch an MRI on and off, right? MRIs, for those who don't know, use stupendously powerful magnets. In fact, there have been deaths caused by them.
Yeah.
You look up death caused by MRI, and I'll tell you what happens.
No.
Every single time.
Don't listen
Right.
to Phil. Do not look that up.
The news
Seriously.
report, not
You
a
will have
video.
nightmares forever.
But what has almost 100% of cases happened is some idiot has left a gas cylinder in the room. You turn the MRI machine on and it will fly across the room into it, asphyxiating the patient or like crushing them or whatever. So the idea that you can have metal weapons in a box in an MRI or anywhere near an MRI room is a nonsense. You can't, unless that MRI room had been disused for a long time, because you can't just like, you don't just flick like you flick a switch for the magnet, but you can't just like, it needs to be, the magnet has to be super cool. That's how it's become so powerful. And it requires a lot of energy to do that. So you can't just like turn them on and off like a light switch.
Do you know what it feels like to me? Another Hamas trap that the Israeli Defense Forces just wandered straight into.
Or the thing is,
because the Hamas would have put out stuff to make them think there was stuff going on in the hospital, and then they turn up.
It's possible. It's possible. I honestly don't know. Yes, there was a reason why the IDF went there. It wasn't just because they wanted to crash a hospital. But at the same time, I don't trust either side to tell me what's happening. You know, if I see a photo of something, oh, look, a weapons dump, I don't trust it to have been a real weapons dump. It might have been planted by Hamas. It might have been planted by Israel. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point is that they have both committed, Hamas and the Israeli government have both committed war crimes. That's fairly obvious. Yeah. Incredibly obvious. And no one in this country is denying that. No political party in this country is denying. There's plenty of people on Twitter.
Yeah.
But you know, the Conservatives aren't denying that. They're a bit like about it, but they're not denying it. Labour are not denying it. You know, they've both talked about the fact, because you know, the Conservatives even this week made it clear that they don't think that Israel can ignore the International Criminal Court, because Boris Johnson said that. That's why that was the official government position until it was reversed effectively this week, because Boris Johnson said, oh no, Israel's not subject to the International Criminal Court. So on what basis? But that's what he said.
Oh, wow.
So obviously now, but now the official government position is, oh no, if you know, international law applies to everyone. This from the government who doesn't even think British law applies to them, but you know, that's a different thing. Although I say it's a different thing. Oh, sorry.
One Angry Pagan, thank you very much for the super chat. Did those MPs not watch Starmer's Chatham House speech? I thought it was very clear in his explanation why he's calling for a ceasefire wouldn't work. No, they didn't. Or if they did, they thought that their constituents wouldn't, and they don't trust their own comms to be effective enough to explain to people why they went for this instead.
But the other thing, in terms of those MPs may be thinking it would cause problems with that they thought that they were backing up their constituents. So there's two things I would say to this. First of all, if like there's a lot of people behaving as if every Muslim voter in the country is going to vote against an MP that has a particular stance on Gaza, which is, first of all, quite Islamophobic itself, because you're saying that Muslim voters vote as Muslims, not as people,
as a block.
Not as people, not as bankers or doctors or rail workers or something like that. But then there was a poll came out, so I was just going over this. So the case study was carried out, that the field work was carried out between the 27th of October and 3rd of November, where, if anything, Labour's position wasn't as hard on Israel as it is now. And it still comes out with 64% of Muslim voters intend to vote for Labour, 19% for the Conservatives.
Yeah. They were trying to make out in a report that was a massive drop from 71. It wasn't that much. I want to address something that BUFU Mike is saying. No one mentions how Israel helped create and fund Hamas, though. Well, I mean, if you watch Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, he did a fantastic piece about that, exactly about that, and how Netanyahu and Hamas basically go hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you can look back, you know, when you're doing the sort of how this led to this and led to this and this led to this. There's been such a cycle of violence over such a long time. And there have been attempts in the past to get a lasting peace, and people on both sides have basically
sabotaged
blocked it. Yeah,
Well,
and sometimes it's
Bean got
literally
shot
sabotage.
dead, mate. He got shot
Yes.
dead by
Yeah.
right-wing Jewish Israeli, and I think Netanyahu was
That
involved
led
in
to
that as well.
Netanyahu. That you know, so that basically led to Netanyahu, his rise to power. So it's there's been sabotage on both sides on this.
By people who just want war. They just want the world to burn, and they don't care.
Or
how
they
many
want one
children have
side to be
die.
utterly destroyed. Like it's genocidal on. There's genocidal maniacs on both sides here. Which is why what'll happen. I know what'll happen if Biden wins the presidential election. Labour are going to win as well. There's going to be a real push for. There's going to be a real push for another peace settlement, the two-state solution. But I just, after so many cycles, you just think one side or the other, like Israel or Palestine or both, will just at this particular point, you would think Israel would be the blockers this time, but it could easily be either.
Yeah,
you'll just think there's going to be another big push, and nothing. I hope it works. I hope one day it works, but I'm just not sure I see it.
Just to come back to a point that Lipshin is making a few times, is saying basically, why are we talking about this when there's so much going on in the UK? Well, we're talking about the Labour Party, but why they're talking about it is that's politics. This channel exists to talk. And we get criticism for talking about the Tories too much. We're always slagging off the Tories, not talking about Labour. So we try to talk about Labour. But just to respond to saying, have we forgotten about the problems in Ukraine? No. Next week, I'm going to Ukraine with Christmas presents for kids. So if you want to contribute to that, go to ukr.com and you can help out there. We're taking 200 kids. We're taking 200 presents over to kids who are in Kharkiv. That's the plan at the moment anyway. So if we get loads of money, we can do more. But we're taking one van. And we have to go from Germany, because you can't take hire vans out the UK anymore because of Brexit. It's good, that, isn't it? And I can't wrap up 200 presents here and take them out of the country because they'll want to know what's in the presents and if I'm going to resell them.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just, so I'm having to fly to Germany to do this and buy the presents in Germany. So there you go. That's another Brexit bonus, isn't it? Could have been spending the money in this country, but...
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like domestic things, though, I can say this in relation to it. We have a situation where right now the Conservatives are talking. First of all, we know the big news today is they want their tax cuts for the rich, and they're going to pay them by killing lots of poor people off. That is what's in the front pages today. They're not talking about killing poor people. Oh, if they haven't got work, they must look for work. Yeah, they have to get benefits. I've been out of work before. I had to do an awful lot to prove I was. They didn't just take my word for it. They didn't just bring me in each week. Go, are you looking for work? Yeah. All right. Thanks. See you next week. No, I had to produce documentation. I had to show them what jobs I'd found, how I'd applied for them, what I'd done. I had to actually do homework when I was unemployed. And this was years ago. You're not going to tell me the Tories have made the system softer for people who are unemployed. So you already have to jump through a lot of hoops. You can look, if I put in my video for later on today, if you Google dies after benefits cuts, you will find lots of new UK news stories of people who have died because of this level of cruelty, and they're going to raise the level of cruelty. Then you've got other Tories who want us to literally destroy all human rights laws. Why? So that they can send 200 refugees to Rwanda. They want to abolish all human rights laws, and they're openly now saying that. That is what is in the Telegraph. The most credible of the Tory media. The Telegraph are actually saying human rights laws, they were all right in the past. We don't need them anymore. So they want to suspend all human rights laws in the UK for 69 million people, just so they can send 200 people to Rwanda, right? Against their will. This is all happening, and you've got another bunch of people going, oh, we would quite like to stop Labour being able to win the next election because they don't agree with us on this policy that no UK government can actually enforce anyway. That is the madness of politics. And it's the madness of politics on the left wing, because there's plenty of lunacy on the right wing, right? But they're not me. Like, I'm not, I don't, but this is what sometimes depresses me. And I actually got quite depressed last night. I had to just turn off quite a lot of politics because it just occurred to me. You're seeing this, right? You're seeing this cruelty amongst the most vulnerable people in society, cruelty that's going to kill many of them. And they're wanting to suspend all human rights laws. They're openly now saying that. There's over 100 Tory MPs who want us to abolish all human rights laws in the UK. And you are going, we should make life difficult for Labour, who are going to reverse that.
Yeah.
Because we don't like what they say about this part of the world they've no real influence in.
Yeah. Yeah, like Israel or Hamas are going to listen to the opposition party in the UK. I mean, Netanyahu is to the right of.
If we had the
to
power,
the right of Donald Trump.
if we had the power to enforce our will, I would say, of course, there should be a ceasefire because we'd have the power to enforce it on both sides. Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah.
But we don't.
Shout out to One Angry Pagan. I don't understand how a two-state solution is supposed to work without a social detox on either side first. Yeah, I mean,
well,
you're right.
You need UN peacekeepers, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you need UN peacekeepers. You need the Truth and Reconciliation Committee like they had after South Africa ended its apartheid rule.
Yeah,
there's going to be a lot of. You're going to have a situation in some ways, not very, but in some ways similar to Northern Ireland. Peace can come to the Middle East, but there needs to be the will, and the people who don't want peace need to be put in jail, not put in power.
Yeah, we have to consider, and there's not enough emphasis on this in the media. Occasionally you'll get like a Guardian piece. There are communities there that have Israelis and Arabs like living side by side together. There's no issue between them. The issues are those Palestinians who are like basically kept in, I would call it an apartheid type state. And you've got Israelis who are very conscious of the fact that they are surrounded by people who would, if they could, see them completely wiped from the earth. Yeah. So that's what sort of breeds the resentment and even hate. It's not helped by grifters in this country and others who are just trying to, people, the political commentators in this country, it's like a school fight and you're just sort of shouting for one of them to punch the other one in the nose.
Yeah.
They're not actually helping.
Yeah. Shout out to Ryan Brown. Thanks for the super chat. But Labour will bring in 7 bins and a meat tax.
Good.
Exactly. I thought you put it very well. I said this a few times actually, where you go, what do you want? Do you want a Labour Party that will only give you 50% of what you want? Or do you want a Tory party forever that gives you 0% of what you want? And Countdown to Power is asking, will they have time to get these disabled persecution measures into law? I've had to appeal twice just to be given the pittance I already get since 2010. I have Crohn's disease. Sorry to hear that, Countdown to Power. That's awful. And I'll share a petition I'd like you to all sign if you would. And this is to get the medication, including Kaftrio, to people who have cystic fibrosis. It can be a real life-changing drug. This isn't just a case of improving your life quality by a couple of percent. This is like a huge night and day difference to the 2 people I know that have taken it and it's worked for. And it doesn't work for everyone, but for the people it does. And they're saying, no, we don't have enough money. It's too expensive. We have to spend it on other things like yachts for millionaire friends of ours, like Michelle Mone. She needs a yacht. Did you hear she needed a yacht? So they gave her £203 million.
Yes.
And do you know how much the uplift for the NHS for the whole winter, for the whole country is?
Minus something, to put it in real terms, I strongly suspect.
It's 200 million. So it's 3 million less than they gave some woman so she could buy a yacht. they gave to a millionaire for faulty PPE that she denied she had anything to do with it. But turns out, shock horror, mate, she was lying.
Yeah.
Can you believe that? A Tory
I can.
peer lying.
Somehow I can
A
believe it.
Tory
Yeah.
peer put in the House of Lords by David Cameron, who came back this week. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Oh my word. Dave is asking anyone else just get an advert. I'm really sorry, but YouTube have been changing how
They have
do
changed
these.
stuff. Yeah.
They've changed stuff so adverts might appear. Yeah. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. Yeah,
Sorry.
it started today. You know, you go onto your page and you either monetize it or you don't. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
there's over the last few years they've removed, which, you know, is one of those things, but they've removed more and more sort of fine control over it. It's either do you want it monetized or not. Okay.
Yeah. So never mind. But yeah, we're just talking quickly about not quickly, but we're just talking about this new about the new Tory policy to basically penalise the disabled, people who are
Or just people in long-term ill health or something.
Yeah.
Because
Mental health.
it's been the case for a while now that you can get a doctor's note that says, yeah, this person's not fit for this work.
Yeah.
And sometimes the DWP will get someone who's like on minimum wage to go, no, this isn't quite right. Yeah, I'm going to overrule this doctor. Whereas now the proposals are that the doctor's got nothing to do with it. GPs have got nothing to do with it. There's going to be like a lifestyle coach, which is, again, it'll be someone on minimum wage who gets a 2-page PDF training. Like, here's your training, it'll take you about 20 minutes, read that. And they'll go through a box, and so this person who's not medically qualified will decide whether you are fit for work, and of course they are working according to guidelines from a minister who wants people to be found fit for work.
Yeah.
And GPs are going to be taken out of the process according to these reports completely.
So your doctor won't be able to basically give you a sick note
anymore. Well, I don't know that, but it might work for your work, but not for the DWP. What it sounds like, obviously, I've not seen any legislation presented yet, but what it sounds like to me is that you will be deemed medically fit or not by someone with zero medical qualifications or training.
That is just, I mean, it's cruelty beyond measure. But to go back to the question that Countdown to Power was asking, are they going to have time to get this through? Because can't this just be held up in the House of Lords? Like they're saying, there's a good chance, unless they manage to get the piece of legislation to overrule international law or whatever they were planning to do with the boat. Oh no, it's to declare Rwanda a safe country. Safe. Unless they get it in the next 2 hours, the House of Lords can hold it up for over a year.
They can hold it. They can hold it up. There's no more sessions of Parliament for the election, no matter when the election is. With the case of this DWP, though, it may not require primary legislation. That's the problem.
Oh, could this be a statutory instrument?
Because it'll just, it could just be guidelines that they need to change rather than the law. So I don't know. I'm not an expert. So not everything requires primary legislation. Not every change in a system requires primary legislation, at which point it'll have nothing to do with the Parliament.
Someone's just posted about Charlotte Owen. Nick is Charlotte Owen just made a point about
it wasn't
it was a maiden speech, wasn't it, in the House of
Lords?
It
wasn't. It was some time ago. That now it was last week, I think. Now her maiden speech. She may have made another speech today. I don't know.
Okay,
but she made her maiden speech last week.
She had been on quite the journey.
That was last week. I remember thinking that.
Intern to the House of Lords, 6 years.
Yeah,
quite.
She was born and now she found herself in the House of Lords. Well, that's quite a journey. That's quite a journey.
Do you know what?
Was born, stood next to Boris Johnson into the House of Lords.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is particularly galling for me because, I remember leaving. I remember walking out of Central Station onto Bold Street in Liverpool years and years ago, and there was a queue outside Waterstones, and it went all the way up the hill, all the way to the bombed out church, and I was like, oh my God, who's here? Is it the Pope? Is it Paul McCartney? Who is it? So I walked over and said, who is it? And they said it's Colleen Rooney, and she was signing books, and I'm like, Wayne Rooney's wife? They're like, yeah. At the time she was 21.
Yeah.
She married a footballer.
Yeah.
And that was her book, and all these people up the hill. And when Charlotte Owen says she's been on quite the journey, I literally spent 4 years going to every country in the world on my own on a shoestring budget, without flying,
Yeah.
and I can't even get a book deal in this country. So I mean, Charlotte Owen getting elevated to the House of Lords.
Hmm.
It's slightly galling, but she is now the poster child, not just for nepotism, but for the abolition of the House of Lords. Because this can't go on, can it?
No, it really can't. I mean, some people have talked about if you're going to bring in reforms, maybe you just have fixed terms, so that when you're elevated to the House of Lords, it's for like 10 years, and that's your lot.
Or maybe they just shouldn't allow it.
I
Maybe
would
Labour
just
should
get
just
rid of it.
absolutely take the mick and put all the people
Well,
that the Daily Mail hate, Marcus
Yeah.
Rashford, Carol Vorderman, Gary Lineker, Stuart Lee, they should all get gongs, all of them in the House of Lords tomorrow. That'd be brilliant.
yeah,
Greta Thunberg,
it would.
make a lady of.
She's Swedish, though.
Yeah.
I know Evgeny Lebedev went in, but
Lebedev.
he's resident in this country, though, isn't he?
Lord of bloody
Siberia.
Siberia, he is.
I know, that was a proper piss take. That
He
it
did
was
a lot,
quite
just-
funny because he had to ask for the Kremlin's permission, and they gave it. Of course, they did, because they know it's humiliating the UK.
I know.
Do you imagine a Lord of Siberia who's actually in the UK Parliament? It's absolutely
Unelected member of the House of Lords. No, I mean, I think Labour should either absolutely take the piss or get rid of it. I mean, they're talking about reforming it, but I think they should just get rid. Talking of getting rid of,
I'm hoping they've just realised that actually getting rid in 5 years is tricky. So they're just going to do bit by bit. I hope that's it. And I hope it's not one of those things that gets left on we're going to get around to it. And then, what do you mean we're out of power? So I hope it's one of those things they are actively working towards. Yeah. And you can call it a reform in the first term, but it's moving towards just getting rid of the whole bloody lot.
Copperbeard's point, no point in the House of Lords. The government can ran through legislation anyway. Well, they can hold it up for a year. So any new legislation from today, any new legislation that the government bring in can be held up by the House of Lords until after the next election.
Yeah, I mean, they won't take the piss. They won't do it like with everything. They'll pick but they will absolutely, I'm sure, do it if Rishi Sunak tries to set the government above the law.
Yeah.
If he tries to say, oh yeah, we've got total respect for the courts and the rule of law, we just don't think we should be subject to it. If anything like that, should absolutely be blocked by the House of Lords. But the thing is, the House of, I used to be okay with the unelected nature of the House of Lords because it was just a scrutinising chamber. It was understood it wouldn't really block things. Yeah. And the people that were in it were people who were like retired judges and parliamentarians and people who were used to reading and understanding legislation. So it made sense. Just as a scrutinizing chamber, it made sense. But now, I mean, you've put all sorts of shit in there who've never read a piece of legislation in their life. Charlotte Owens knows nothing. Ian Botham, it's like, what? Evgeny Lebedev, that's just a piss take.
A man famous. I don't know if you know what he's famous for, but he once accidentally tweeted a picture of his own knob.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah,
it's more
apparently
famous.
He played some game as well.
Yeah, he's quite a good cricketer.
Oh, cricket, that's the one.
And
he hit a ball with a stick. Just put him in the House of Lords.
He bowled him as well. He was a very good cricketer.
He threw a ball at a stick. Put him in the House of Lords.
Yeah.
Am I going to upset the Yorkshireman about cricket here?
Well, he was not from Yorkshire, but it's no. Nonetheless, you don't put people in the House of Lords because they were good at cricket. You put them in the House of Lords because they're good at scrutinising legislation. That's their job.
Well, what about?
I wouldn't want someone operating on me just because I admire their poise at the crease. I want a surgeon.
What about someone who can write rock opera? Do you think they should be in the House of Lords?
As long as they understand legislation.
Do you think Andrew Lloyd Webber understands legislation?
I've no idea, in all honesty. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But what I do think is, if given that their job is to scrutinise legislation, put people in, are they senior lawyers? Like they need to be KCs or former judges. That's fine. put in parliament. Like, do you know, someone like Nadine Dorries, it's like you sort of instinctively think she's not suitable. But at the same time, she was an MP for a while. She was a minister and she's been a Secretary of State. So in terms of the tick boxes, you can't really argue against it. I'd be much happier with someone like Nadine Dorries in the House of Lords than someone, say, like Andrew Lloyd Webber. Well, because she's been I know she is crap, but if you've got to come up with an objective set of criteria,
but
she meets
there's
them.
no criteria, is there?
No,
It's
but
like,
if you
do we
were
like
to
you
come
or
up,
not?
if you were to come up with an objective set of criteria
Do they have
that
a
reflected
board?
the fact
Do they
that
have
she,
a board? Like, do they have a group of people whose job it is to look at who Boris Johnson has thrown in their general direction to say no?
Yes, yeah, they have said no with Paul. I actually find the only thing about Evgeny Lebedev's elevation that I find hilarious is they literally allowed in a Russian agent but wouldn't allow in Paul Dacre twice. That's how bad Paul Dacre is.
Wow.
That's how much of a threat he is.
Don't forget, on the front cover of, I think, the Mail today was big splash saying about the unelected House of Lords wants to make the votes keep coming. A big thing about the unelected House of Lords. Not bitter, are we, Mr. Dacre? Are you bitter at all?
Daily Mail. Oh yeah, it is the Daily Mail. That's right.
Yeah.
Unelected
so
Lords
paper
plot to
just
block.
went off on one about the unelected House of Lords not doing the bidding of the unelected Prime Minister and our new unelected Home Secretary, who's in the House of Lords, so he can be Home Secretary but not be scrutinised over policy in the House of Commons because he's not allowed in the House of Commons because he's not an MP.
This is the thing, though. This Rwanda thing. I cannot.
So much stuff this week.
The public just need to understand. Like, I even saw a poll that was saying, you know, it sort of said, do you understand that some refugees were sent to Rwanda? No, it should have said 200 refugees. 200. The plan was for 200 a year for 5 years.
1%.
So you could say, I mean, it's like we get something like, about 25,000 asylum claims a year. And the reason the backlog's so high is because the reason the small boats problem started is they got rid of safe routes and then took people off processing. Yeah. So of course,
and also they entered the Dublin Agreement, which allowed.
Well, we ended our returns agreement. Yeah. But, you know, Rishi Sunak's boasting, we've reduced the number of crossings by so much this year. A lot of that's because he you know, it's not moan about Albanians anymore. That's because we got a returns agreement with Albania.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where the vast majority of not real asylum seekers were coming from. People who were just coming here as economic nouns. The vast majority of people coming from Africa, coming from the Middle East, especially when it's women and children, they are genuine asylum seekers. And it was found 70% last year were genuine. I think if you take those
more than
Albanians out the equation, it's going to go up even more. Yeah.
Except the Daily Mail used that as evidence that we're too soft somehow, because you say, well, in France it's a much lower proportion that's accepted. Yes, because more get to France, you idiot. Yeah. By the time they've got to our little plague island, most of the less determined ones have already been turned back by some bugger else.
Dame Doris barking.
The thing is, honestly, if you came up with an objective set of criteria that just said needs to be able to scrutinize legislation, there's nothing you could really do to stop her. But she would be in the minority of half-wits in the House of Lords, at least, because all it would comprise is, it would be like, you know, it would be former MPs, and there's nothing you could really do about that. I mean, they're MPs. They were elected at one time. It'd be former MPs. It could be leaders of trades unions. They're used to reading legislation a lot. It could be like senior lawyers and judges. I mean, you know, if you did that, business leaders, some business leaders, obviously they need to be familiar with legislation. So it would actually just be a chamber of experts. They might not all be the people we approve of, but it would be a chamber at least of experts. And Nadine Dorries.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been one hell of a week. We haven't even mentioned Suella Braverman. She was our she was our Home Secretary, I think.
Home
on Monday.
Secretary twice, and was sacked. And was sacked twice for basically threatening national security of one form or other.
Yep. The woman who tried to incite a riot at the Cenotaph on Armistice Day. That was nice. Nice Tory thing to do then, innit? Let's get a load of bother boys, Nazis, to turn up in London at a time that, you know, there's going to be a protest against the situation in Gaza going on, and let's see what happens, and put a thin line of blue between them, and put police officers' lives on the line
Well,
for her political
I
machinations.
mean, 9 ended up in hospital. I tell you what I find, rather incredible. Again, there's no mention of this in the media. So Rishi Sunak's been lying about crime again, saying, "Oh, we've reduced crime." It's like he's doing his old dodge about not including fraud, which is like the major cause of crime. It's like, by far and away the biggest slice of crime. I don't know why he's going to the bother of lying. Why doesn't he just do what he's going to do with Rwanda? Why doesn't he just abolish all laws for everyone, not just the government? And then there will be no crime. Easy. Crime level 0. There's no such thing as a crime. Why not just do that?
Yeah.
Declare all crime non-existent. It's already the Tories have already declared poverty. They've already declared poverty non-existent. They've already declared racism non-existent.
That's non-existent.
And they're going to declare Rwanda a safe place. If they can just declare the world to be what they want it to be, why not? Why not just say, "Oh, there's no NHS waiting list. They didn't to 0." Just like abolish all waiting lists. "Oh, the waiting list is now 0. Abolish all crime. Oh, the crime rate is now 0. Easy.
There's a quote from Doctor Who that
yes, I like that one.
Rishi Sunak, not Rishi. Where they come from? James O'Brien likes to use, which is there's a
I've used that in a WhatsApp chat recently.
Between powerful people and stupid people is that they don't change their beliefs to suit the facts. They change the facts to suit their beliefs
or views. Tom Baker, 1970s. It's one of my favourite quotes. Tom Baker had a few good ones. It wasn't his quotes, of course. It was whoever wrote them for him. But he was just a talking prop. But it was there were some good ones in the 70s.
Yeah, some of them were written by Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, also known as the 7th Monty Python. Well, there's a few people with that. The 7th Python is like the 5th Beatle, isn't it? There's a range of people that could be.
So technically, I suppose there was a 5th Beatle, really, because they sacked him.
Yeah. Well, also there was Stuart Sutcliffe, who was with the band while they were in Hamburg, who died very young, unfortunately. Countdown to Power. Wasn't Brexit supposed to be about stopping unelected bureaucrats being involved in our system? How's that working out for you, Brexit fans?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about.
I mean, what it was really about was removing our rights. For some of them, it was about not paying taxes. They're sort of quite happy.
Yeah.
But there's a good core of them for whom it was about removing our rights, turning Britain into basically a slave island.
Yeah. And they'll make lots of money out of it. I mean, there was a financial incentive for disaster capitalists like Rees-Mogg to go for it. There was a big carrot for the likes of Rishi Sunak, who supported Brexit at the time, because he knew that if we left the EU, we could get a shitty trade deal with India, which doesn't protect any workers here or any workers in India, but will make his share portfolio skyrocket. So anyone in power, in some position of power, who's telling you to vote for Brexit, they had a vested interest in. It was the wealthy getting wealthier. But I was thinking about this earlier today. Like, Joe Cox got murdered a couple of weeks before the Brexit referendum. Imagine being on, like, at the time, going, that guy was on my side. He wanted Brexit. I want to be on the same side as that guy. I want to be on the same side as every single Nazi in the country.
Someone made the point, actually, when we're bringing it back to that beginning thing about the Gaza amendment, which, remember, will achieve 0 practical benefits to anyone in Gaza, however it's phrased. So someone was noting that 2 MPs, because David Amos as well, so 2 MPs have been murdered in recent years by extremists. And the Green Party are promoting a list of MPs that, as they describe it, voted against peace in Gaza. Basically promoting a hit list.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the Greens have showered themselves in glory over the last couple of years, to be honest with you, especially Jenny Jones, who was a Brexiteer, and her attempts to basically do what the SNP were trying to do this week, of making Labour look crap. And it's like, will you just
and it's
just take it out on the Tories, please?
I understand the party politics, because the Greens are not competing with the Tories; they're competing with Labour in Brighton now. But at the same time, you do have to think there are there are certain, you need to think through potential consequence of your action, because if you're going to end up with another MP murdered, is it really worth it?
Yeah. Grimfan 999 is saying the Greens are going to some really weird places right now. Tom Baker hates Tories, yeah, because he's a good Scouser. But Paul McGann and Tom Baker, two Scouts. We've had two Scouts.
Unfortunately, we've had to discuss another Scouser today, Nadine Dorris.
Oh God! And Esther McVeigh is back as the war on the Tsar.
The thing, I don't know. Actually, the government deny that, but at the same, let's see if they said they are going to publish her responsibilities. Let's have a look if hold on.
She's the minister with that portfolio.
Yeah, but you still have responsibilities.
She's got to take the war to the woke.
Yeah,
which is being polite and nice to people and not being horrible. And not
Lord,
kicking people.
I'm just looking at UK cabinet. I didn't actually know what his title was now. Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton.
Oh my God, that sounds like a joke. Chipping Norton. Oh my God, that's like Tunbridge.
Better than Soggy Bottom. Like Noel Edmonds was Soggy Bottom of it.
Chipping Norton.
Oh no, that's not right.
There's a place near me here in Durham called Pity Me.
Right.
Where you go? Pity Me.
I can't. They don't seem to have. The link is a bit weird. It's going on to. She's just There's no responsibilities down for her as yet, so we'll have to find out when at some point they'll publish them. But yeah, at the moment it's just minister without portfolio in the cabinet office.
Yeah, so she's gonna come down like a ton of bricks on wokeness and things like inclusivity training. So that people understand that some people have different needs, and in a workplace or in a social environment or even in sort of public office, maybe that they're going to get rid of all that, because we don't want people to have to consider people who are partially sighted, people who are blind, people who are in wheelchairs, their needs. Let's get rid of that. And then what we'll do is we'll make it really horrible for those people. We'll make it like impossible for them to get a job, and then we'll make it so we take their benefits away if they don't get a job. Tory logic. They're so
because that's what they're going to do when it's like this. Oh, you've got to look for work in order to get benefits. You already do. You have to produce quite a lot of evidence that you do as well. And so now what obviously, if there's going to be any change, I mean, if there's going to be any change, what they'll be basically saying is, okay, we're going to come up with some arbitrary steps, which if you haven't completed means that you're not really looking for work. So they go, okay, you've been out of work for like 5 months now. Have you used that time to earn a PhD? No. Oh, you're not really trying. You could go off the benefits immediately. That's what it's about.
Yeah. And none of these politicians that are pushing for these kind of rules, I mean, the big officers of state now are all public school boys. They've never had to want for anything in their lives. They've never worried about finance. Well,
that's it. They've not even any experience. They'll not have known anyone either to talk to that's had this. They've not known anyone. I mean, I've been unemployed a couple of times, but I was also, when I was employed, had a very close friend who basically lived in a piss-soaked flat in Doncaster. It was a terrible life while he was unemployed. Proper poverty. Well, at least he had a roof over his head, but it was a piss stoned. So honestly, the whole thing smelled of piss. It's a pretty grim existence. Concrete block of flats stinking of piss all the time.
Yeah.
And they've no experience of even having known people like that.
No. And when you have the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, like clip of him laughing about having no working class friends.
Yeah.
And the policies they're coming out with just to penalise the poor and to make the wealthy wealthier. And again, it's like I would take 10% of the stuff that I want of Labour getting into power and doing 10% of the stuff I want.
Well, if we had a party, if we actually
0% of what I want, they're actually doing things that I actively don't want them to do.
Yeah, that's the thing. If we had a party that actually literally did nothing, that would still be an improvement.
Yes, it would. Not that I think Labour are going to do nothing, but
no.
Even if they did, It would be, and it's an incredibly privileged position. I always find this with a lot of people who have a bit of money behind them. Maybe they were born into wealth. I don't know. But their attitude is kind of like, I'll be all right for another 5 years of the Tory
Yeah.
government. So I'm going to criticize Labour. I'm going to spend all my time, even though I say I'm left wing,
Yeah.
I'm going to spend all my time slagging off Labour, slagging off Keir Starmer.
Well,
And at the same time, I'm thinking there are millions of people in this country who aren't going to survive another 5 years of
yeah.
this.
They're not. There's people that aren't going to survive the next year
Yeah, so check your
directly as a
privilege.
result of this. And the thing is as well, it's not just that they don't seem to care that the Tories, they would be comfortable with the Tories winning again.
Yeah.
They're actively at the moment trying to use up as much media bandwidth on an issue that no politician in the UK collectively or on their own can do anything about.
Yeah.
When they could be using that bandwidth to point out the performative cruelty of this government and the fact that they actually want to take away all of our human rights to send 200 people to a place they say is safe and therefore
Which
is no
isn't.
deterrent. So it makes no sense anyway. It's like, why aren't they wanting to use, if they cared about anything, why don't they want, where they have a media platform, where they can get a bit of a media, 15 minutes on a media show, why aren't they plugging that?
Yeah.
Because they don't really care. They're grifters. These people are no different to Nigel Farage. They're grifters.
Yeah.
They have political beliefs, yes. They genuinely hold certain political beliefs, but ultimately what they're after is their own comfortable lifestyle.
Yeah. Last night there was the Magnitsky Awards, which are named after a Russian journalist who was murdered by the Russian regime under Putin. And Ian Duncan Donuts was there, and he was handing out an award or something. Meanwhile, who else was there? The daughters of the guy from his life was dramatized in the movie Hotel Rwanda with Don Cheadle. He was captured by the Rwandan regime in 2020. They redirected a flight that was going somewhere else, so it landed in Rwanda, and then they arrested him on board, and then they tortured him. They tortured him. And this is like, it's not even like living memory. This is like a couple of years ago. And at the same award ceremony, you had a Tory MP who's sitting there going, "Yeah, Rwanda's a safe country. We should send these women and children fleeing war." I mean, like genuine asylum seekers. That's the killer line, isn't it? It's not even like people who are found to not be real asylum seekers.
No, they won't have been processed at all.
Yeah.
They're just sending 200 random people, including unaccompanied children. They wouldn't rule that out. Yes. Unaccompanied children,
it's absolutely monstrous. And to think that Labour would do anything approaching something this evil and think they can get away with it with the morality of the people who vote Labour, or like the tabloids, would they let Labour get away with doing this thing? No, they wouldn't.
Well,
they sort of shit when.
I mean, they actually tried. Yeah, I'm going to say, when they were in power last time, they did try some of this processing centres stuff in Africa, including maybe Rwanda, and that was just literally going to be for processing, and that they didn't get to go ahead with that either, because that was seen as a bit dodgy.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't want processing centres. I would like to see a situation where you can go to any high commission or embassy in the world, as long as you're you're from a country that is on the list of places that you can claim asylum from. You can't claim asylum from France. You can't claim asylum from the USA.
You can try, but you could. There's, in any country, there are people who can genuinely be persecuted.
Yeah, but allow people to make the application. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
without having to set foot on British soil to do so. We have the facilities to do that. They can have their fingerprints taken, iris scanned, all that kind of stuff. Find out who they are, and if they are genuine asylum seekers, we can fly them to the UK. It'd be cheaper than what we do at the moment.
But I mean,
straight away.
I mean, we've got no problems putting a processing centre in France. France have said that's fine. In fact, we're actually building us a centre, only it's going to be a detention centre. It's like, we're detaining them while we process them. No, we're just detaining them. I mean, that's not a long-term solution. What happens when that gets filled up, like every prison in this country?
Yeah. It's not a great state of affairs, is it? David Farrow's talking about Everton getting docked 10 points today. Did you hear about this?
I saw that. I did see that.
For getting relegated. Oh my god. For financial impropriety or something. It was ethics, financial ethics. 10 points docked.
Immediate,
do we
yeah.
even have 10 points at the moment?
Let's have a quick look.
Oh, to be an Everton fan. I saw on the QI website, not QI, the QI elves thread today, they were talking about what blue means in different languages. Like, to be blue in Britain is to be sad. To be blue in German means to be drunk, and to
Right.
be light blue in Russia means to be gay.
Right.
So there you go. Happy days. Di Stanton, thank you very much for the super chat. They don't want to take our human rights to deport 200 people. They want to take our human rights because they want to take away our human rights. Yeah, but they're using that as the excuse. Thank you very much for the super chat. But they're using that as the excuse, the catalyst, if you like, to say, this is why we need to do this. These 200 people, they need to be sent. 1% of the
yeah, they're on 4 points now. 4 points.
Cheers for looking,
So,
looking that up, Phil.
It's no problem. All they need is one more win than Luton, and they're still out the relegation zone. It's not dead and buried. They're just
Okay.
It's just that there was quite a lot of teams between them in the relegation zone, and now they're basically equal with Burnley, but with a better goal difference.
Ay, no me gusta. Bob X says, why would they care about long-term solutions? Anything damaging they can see as making Labour look bad when they take power and give.
Oh yeah, that's it. This is what I thought was their most dangerous moment, when they realised they're not going to win and would just think to themselves, how can we screw the country over for Labour, rather than just for their own profit.
Like the Portuguese leaving Angola and Mozambique trashing the place on the way out. But yeah, this is actually a bit of a worry, because this feeds into what we were talking about at the top of the hour about Labour comms. Like, if Labour can't communicate, if the top brass in Labour can't communicate to their own MPs, what you are very well, you do very well at communicating to the people watching this and to me, what's going to happen when they get into power and everything's shit because the Tories have set all these traps up. They've made, the years of underfunding. Everything's crumbling. Everything's falling apart. All our infrastructure, our roads, our railways, it's all falling apart. And it's going to look a bit shit for Labour. And what they need is to be able to show some wins before the 2029 election.
Yeah.
And if they can't articulate that, they're in real trouble.
Yeah, it would certainly help. Yes, I mean, we know, for example, one of their plans is, because they're bringing in these workers' rights straight away. It means people will have had several years to see the benefits of that. Unions will have had several years to be able to use that to their advantage to improve things. But yes, you are reliant on people just feeling that things are better. Whereas what you'd ideally do, they need to feel that things are better, but you also need to keep asking them.
Yeah.
So they are going to need to be better at communication. And my worry is that maybe they won't be, because if they're not taking it seriously enough right now, when, as far as they're concerned, I mean, I don't think it's very much in the balance unless they actually implode. And there's no signs of them actually imploding. Because it is, the difference is, because it was a huge rebellion. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. It's absolutely massive. But at the same time, if you compare it, like I actually saw like media outlets trying to compare it with the Tory rebellions, and it's like, well, there's a bit of a difference here. The Labour MP, the Labour front benchers, there are actual Labour rebels as well. Of course, they will say all sorts of things, but the actual credible Labour MPs, the ones who were members of the front bench, they've all said, I'm resigning because I disagree with this position, but I am fully in support of Labour's grand project and Keir Starmer, all the rest of it. Whereas the Tory rebels are all saying, well, not really resign because sacked, but they're basically saying, I'm not very happy because of this. And it's all wrong. It's all bad. The leader's a dickhead and he should leave immediately. So there's a bit of a difference in the way that those rebellions are taking place. And it's not a difference between Conservatives and Labour. It's a difference between circumstances. The Conservatives are in a hole. The polling this week is an absolute car crash for the Conservatives. For Labour, it's a mixed bag. There are some pollsters that have Labour dropping back, and there are some that have them gaining, but all of them have the Conservatives dropping back. So the sort of average lead is now humongous. They're getting, Sunak is into almost Liz Truss territory, and whereas Labour are nailed on to not just win, but it's embarrassing. I saw the poll that the Mirror were promoting yesterday or the day before, and it's not one of the pollsters I would promote. But I ran it into Electoral Calculus's MRP calculator anyway, just for a laugh, and it would leave the Conservatives on like, what was it now, 70 odd seats.
Brilliant. I saw one that left them on 1 seat. One.
I think that was during Liz Truss's time, I think.
One, Phil. One. Yeah. I was like,
and it wasn't Liz Truss's seat either. But it was, but that's what they're looking at. Any Tory, like, I don't expect Tory MPs to really know much about, how to, most commentators don't seem to know how to really look at polls. But they could easily look at that, and they could easily see someone say, Andrea Jenkins was promoting it. She was happy to promote it. This idea that the Tories will be left on like 77 seats because it's in her interest. Whereas you've not really, and that's the difference. If it was reverse situation, if Conservatives were riding high and it was Labour who were looking like on for losing the next election, even if there was progress, this would be actual genuine crisis for Labour. This would be an absolute crisis.
Yeah.
But it's purely the circumstances which mean it's not.
Well, David Farrer saying in the chat, this for me is the biggest problem with Labour, poor or non-existent messaging. People need to understand why they're taking a particular stand.
Yeah.
Simple words, not legal speak. I can't agree more. Brian has said a point about this year, I get more emails from the Labour Party than from my wife. I was thinking about this today, actually. Most asking for money, but still, it's nice to be wanted. And I'm like, that is not the way that Labour should really be fundraising, because it's shite. I mean, it's just, it's almost as bad as like, do you remember those chain emails you used to get where it's like, pass this on to 10 people and you'll be a millionaire or you'll have good luck. Yeah. And it's just like, this is not the way to communicate with people. If they had a channel like this, which could have super chats, and they could say, right, we're doing a drive to do X, Y, Z. We need to do this. We need to raise enough money to do this. The super chats, money coming in from people actually feeling like they're involved in the conversation. That would work for me, for Labour, but they just choose not to. Because they're still, as far as I'm concerned, their comms team is still living in the 1970s. But I just want to hone in on something that Captain Bart Roberts said, because I'm dying here. I'm dying of envy. I was introduced to Tolkien. I assume you're talking about J.R.R.
Professor Tolkien, yeah.
Professor Tolkien, not Bobby Tolkien. Not
or Christopher Tolkien, his son. I mean, he's at least done some
it might have
writing.
been Christopher Tolkien, who's written more books than Tolkien now. By Harold Wilson's son Giles. I mean, wow, you feel like led a very interesting life, Captain Bart Roberts. That's really cool. You got to meet John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, born in Bloemfontein in South Africa in 1893.
I will just say, though, it sounds like you had more polite chain letters than I did, if all it said was you'll get good luck or win loads of money. Because when I got those chain letters, it was you need to send this or your loved ones will die.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Really? Wow.
I still didn't used to send them because I was a bit of a cynic even then. But
what mailing list were you signing up to, Phil?
This was just at the university. I'd never had an email before.
The
early days of
my first email was Manchester University at manchester.ac.uk. I think it was quite a long long email.
But, do you know what I still use? The password that they gave me to, because it's a complete jumble of letters, but it's stuck in my head. So I actually use it on some things still these days.
That's probably been hacked a long time ago.
No,
be telling people that.
No, it hasn't. It's a complete random jumble of letters, and I always put like a couple of numbers in the front of it as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'll let you off.
But I still use it's like. I'm not even telling you how many letters, but it is completely a random. But it just sort of made a weird, like almost Lewis Carroll-esque nonsense word that I found easy to remember.
I just before we wrap up in a moment, someone mentioned Tom Bombadil. I saw this week on TikTok someone had done a Yo Mama jokes, but Lord of the Rings. So it was like Saruman and Gandalf trading Yo Mama jokes, and one of them was like Yo Mama is so vile. She made Tom Bombadil cry, which I quite liked. But yeah, Tom Bombadil. If you watch the movies, he's been exercised from the movies. He's not in the movies because that whole sequence is a bit silly.
They could have made it work.
Bum,
They
bum.
could have, oh, not the singing. They couldn't have had
Bum,
Frodo
bum,
sing "O Tom Bombadil" in the barrow, but they could have made it work. They just didn't want to. I will just address one thing because it is related to it. Someone was saying, have I thought of volunteering to sort Labour's comms, Phil? I have approached Labour. I have had enigmatic silence every time I've attempted to do so. The thing is, if they don't see they have a problem, they're not going to be receptive to any solutions, are they? They just actually don't see themselves as having a problem. That's the issue.
Sorry, I'm laughing because Vendettas just bought because Bombadil's an annoying shit.
No, he wasn't. He was lovely.
Tell
He
it like
fed
it
the
is.
hobbits and saved them as well. It'd have been a bloody
Yeah, why didn't
short
he take the
story
ring?
if Bombadil
Why didn't he take the
hadn't
ring so
saved
pure
them.
of heart? Why didn't he take
Because
the ring
he would
to
cast
Mordor?
it. He would cast it away. He would cast it aside. He wouldn't see it as important. He was a higher being. You see, he didn't understand
So he's
how
higher being,
important
so
it was.
he would allow Sauron to take
He
over.
did. He didn't actually see the problem. He was like just a bit.
Yeah,
It's basically like a very, very kind. Imagine like Nelson Mandela, but with dementia. It's sort of like that. So,
what a description for Tom Bombadil. Anyway, Ray Harvey, thank you very much for the super chat, mate. I think that's going to be the last of the sesh. Missed the start. My impression is that Labour are again showing they are unfit to govern. They are a party of protest and not government. This pees me right off. Well, I'll just come back to that. No one in the cabinet rebelled. No one. And there's only 199 Labour MPs, and 100 of them are technically front bench MPs, one way or another. And the 10 of them, when they voted, I mean, we've seen the resignation letters of Jess Phillips and a couple of other sort of junior members of the shadow, not the shadow cabinet, but the front bench.
Yeah.
And they were very, very respectful for Keir Starmer and for Labour, and said, I have to vote this way because, we discussed this all at the top of the show. So if you want to watch that again, Ray, you're very welcome to. You can watch on catch up because we discussed all that. And Tolkien hated the films. Doogie, he died in 1973 or something. How did he hate the films? It hadn't even been made. What?
Also, he sold the rights to the film so his kids could have actually an education you probably won't approve of. But but once you sell the rights to your intellectual property, you can't really complain about what happens to it.
I think they did a very, very good job.
I think they did a good job. They missed out some things that they shouldn't have done, and they added things they didn't need to do. But I don't complain.
You shall not pass. Right, I'm off. You off? Are you going to be back tonight? 9 o'clock?
No, I'm off. Film? I'm out. No, I'm off out.
It's not fair. You got a social life.
It's not much of a social life, but I am off out.
Right, so I'm going to be on Aid Thompson and Other Disappointment show at 7:30 on his channel. So look up Aid Thompson Politics here on YouTube. I'm going to be there at 7:30 till 8:30. And then 9 o'clock tonight, we have got the Labour Social. And hopefully we'll have Aid Thompson and Supertansky joining us tonight for the Labour Social. Not Phil, though. He's got better things to do.
Yep. I'm rolling dice.
Okay, so thanks very much for watching. Thanks for all the chat. Thanks for all the super chats. And until next time, say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.